Thank you again for being here. My name is Leah Gage, and I'm one of two community grants managers here at Humanities DC. Today's presentation is all about the Beyond the Archives grant through the DC Oral History Collaborative. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will send out the recording to any of you who registered for today. And if you wish to have captions, if you go down to the Zoom space and click the ellipses button, click more, and then you should be able to enable captions that way. Today, we're going to give some brief introductions to who we are at Humanities DC, as well as what we do and what the humanities are. We'll also talk about the Oral History Collaborative and the Beyond the Archives program. We'll get some brief introductions from you all, if you're willing, and then we'll talk through the Beyond the Archives grant and specifically components of what makes for a successful application. And we'll go through all of the application questions and the weighted review criteria. So again, my name is Leah Gage, and I am one of the community grants managers here at Humanities DC. And Hillary, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Hillary Steen, and I'm the other community grants manager. Thank you so much for being here today.
And Jasper, I don't have you up here, but do you mind to introduce yourself, please?
It's no problem. I'm Jasper. I'm the manager of the DC Oral History Collab program at Humanities DC.
And Loy is not here, I believe, but she is the director of grant making and programs and is also a person that you may be in touch with throughout the grant process. But Hillary and I are typically the ones that you would talk to through the application process, and I'm the main point of contact for this grant. So Humanities DC is one of 56 state humanities councils. We are DC's Humanities Council, and our goal is to connect curious people with bold questions to the powerful stories of our vibrant city of Washington, DC. And we do this through two primary ways: through curated programming. We offer a community journalism program. We are currently recruiting for our independent practitioner fellowship. Those applications are due on Monday, January 20th by 11:59 p.m. So if you're interested in that program, we encourage you to take a look at the programs page of our website and apply as soon as possible. We also offer several monthly culture series events where individuals in DC curate a short event that's curated around a particular topic of interest in DC. But we also do this through supporting the work of 60 plus individuals and organizations across DC. And we do this across 8 wards through 6 grant programs. We expect to award about $1 million this year, as we do most years. And cycle 1 is currently open. So we have 4 grant opportunities currently open. And that is the Visions Grant, Community Culture and Heritage, our Oral History Interviewing Grant, and the Beyond the Archives Grant. And that's the grant that we'll be discussing today. Cycle 2 will open March 4th, and that will include the General Operating Support Grant and our Continuing Oral History Projects Grant. So let's start by asking, how do you define the humanities? Is anybody here willing to speak up and share what are the humanities to you or how you define them? And you can do so by unmuting yourself or dropping it in the chat. Any thoughts? Okay, see.
See, in the chat, someone said liberal arts, non-hard sciences.
Yep, definitely. Liberal arts. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Well, we define the humanities as human stories that allow us to navigate the complexities of our past, present, and future. Basically, we look at the humanities and the humanities disciplines as a compass for interpreting what humans make and exploring what makes us human. And so we do this by looking at our past through history, anthropology, and archaeology. We explore our stories' expressions through literature, linguistics and languages, and art history theory and criticism, and our stories' values through ethics, philosophy, comparative religion, and law. And this is something to think about as we are going through this application, as you will need to identify kind of the primary humanities discipline that you expect to work on if you are to propose Beyond the Archives project. So what is oral history? Oral history is an interdisciplinary, interview-based method of documenting the lived experience of historic moments to inform future generations. It is a long-form interview that allows individuals to give a life story approach to their own history. The Oral History Association says that the value of oral history lies largely in the way it helps to place people's experiences within a larger social and historical context. The interview becomes a record useful for documenting past events, individual or collective experiences, and understandings of the ways that history is constructed. Because it relies on memory, oral history captures recollection about the past, filtered through the lens of a changing personal and social context. We find it to be an extremely valuable method of building understanding and documenting historic moments. It takes a life history approach, and the oral historian seeks to document the narrator's journey. So we see oral history as a way that culture and values are shared to strengthen community, and it's a chance to deepen and complicate the written record of history. Oral history is typically recorded by audio recording or video recording, and so it captures, people's voices, it captures, inflection, it captures emotion. It's a particular way to capture history. It is easy to learn, but difficult to master. And one of the things that we'll be talking about next is the DC Oral History Collaborative, which is a partnership between Humanities DC and the DC Public Library that offers training publicly across DC in oral history practices. And let's watch a very quick video to give you an introduction to the DC Oral History Collaborative.
I'm a native Washingtonian. I'm from Southeast DC. I model, I dance, I act.
I am an archaeologist.
I am a unique, interesting person.
There's a lot of stereotypes about DC that are thrown around.
That's just a place where our government is.
To where politics reigns supreme.
But it's actually community and home to a lot of people.
It's much more diverse neighborhoods and historic neighborhoods that people don't really know about.
So we have to give the narrative, the experiences.
And through oral histories, I really want to highlight these contributions that people don't typically know or aren't necessarily written about in historical records.
It's so easy to just feel like your group is not important if all you learn about is what this person did, what Christopher Columbus did.
There's a lot of resilience that goes into being able to survive those circumstances and still come out on the other side and say, we can be better.
So just to sit down and talk to someone and give them an opportunity to just to tell their life narrative is a very special thing. It's almost like your imagination is ignited.
Just every time you think you know what someone's going to say, they're going to say something different. And that's fabulous.
Your story is important. Your history is important.
It's kind of like giving a gift to the next generation.
And when you share it, and you be so surprised and so shocked how many people be like, oh my God, I went through that too.
When our children and grandchildren look to us for inspiration, they're going to learn from us from whatever it is that we try to do.
So it's important to have these stories and to share these stories and to shout these stories and to sing these stories to inspire others, not only to step up to the plate and feel good about themselves, but to share their stories.
So that is an intro to the DC Oral History Collaborative. As I mentioned, this is a partnership between the DC Public Library and Humanities DC. It started in 2017, and it's a citywide initiative to document and preserve the history of Washington's residents and communities using oral history. Folks who receive grants for either the Oral History Interviewing Grant or the Beyond the Archives Grant become members of the DC Oral History Collaborative, which is a broad network across DC. And members receive access to training and workshops, and ongoing guidance and mentorship from Jasper and others who help facilitate the DC Oral History Collaborative. They become part of a network of community oral historians in DC that's connected by a very active listserv. They also gain access to Their Story, and that is an oral history software platform that we use to help transcribe oral histories, to help keep them online and store them. And so that's something that we're able to offer that's relatively new. And also potential partnership for programs and events featuring your oral history work. So there are 3 DC Oral History Collaborative grant opportunities. Currently available, we have the Oral History Interviewing Grant. We did a workshop on that yesterday that was recorded, and that will go up on our website very soon. So if you're interested in that grant, take a look at that. But today we are talking about the Beyond the Archives grant. We also offer a continuing oral history projects grant in cycle 2 that will open March 4th. So the Beyond the Archives grant offers support for the humanities beyond academia and formal scholarship. And the goal is to spotlight already recorded oral histories and bring them out of the archives. This is a focus on the importance of community voices and informal scholarship. And the grant is really meant to support nimble projects such as panels, short videos, installations, exhibits, things that can really showcase existing recorded oral histories that come from an archive. And when we say archive, we could be talking about the People's Archive at Dig DC, and Dig DC, which is the online portion of that. We have a whole section of the DC Oral History Collaborative archive there where you can find all the archived oral histories. But you may also have oral history archives that you are able to access on your own. Maybe you've recorded oral histories in the past. Maybe your organization has. But again, the goal of this grant is to utilize existing, already recorded oral histories and pull them out of the archives in order to conduct public projects. A couple of examples of these. So this year we funded the 1882 Foundation, and they focus on capturing the history of DC's Chinatown. They had conducted an oral history project a few years ago, capturing oral history interviews and stories over 50 years of DC's Chinatown. And now they are taking recordings of those oral histories and utilizing them to create a K-12 curriculum that will be implemented in DC public schools that allows folks to hear actual voices to understand the history of Chinatown. We also gave a Beyond the Archives grant this year to the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village. They also had recorded some oral histories of members and now they are doing a project called the Faces of Aging, where they're taking those recorded histories of older folks who live at the village. And then they're going to create displays, large-scale displays with the photos of the narrators and QR codes that can give the public access to the recordings, which are housed at the archive. So these are 2 examples of ways that folks have used the Beyond the Archives grant. So now I would like to open it up to you all. If you're willing, you can jump off the mic or you can drop it into the chat, but share a little bit about what you're planning to propose or why you're here. And specifically, if you can speak to the oral history archive that you're planning to access.
I missed that last piece. So are we able to just say it out loud rather than type it?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So my interest area would be the 1968 riots in Washington, D.C. I've worked previously actually to pull oral histories together for projects that I've done. And I just found myself wanting to go deeper into that topic area in the wake of Martin Luther King's assassination. I wish I could recall which actual oral history archive I worked in previously to tell you, but yeah, that's my interest area.
That sounds really cool. Do you think you'll continue to have access to that archive?
Admittedly, I think it was publicly available. Maybe after this call, I can look up what it was. But yes, I think I either had access through my university, my alma mater, American University, and I probably still have access as an alumni, or I might have pulled it off public information that wasn't paywalled or hidden somewhere.
Very cool. That sounds like a great project. Anyone else willing to share, either in the chat or by speaking up? Okay, well, no worries. If you have questions or things come up along the way, please share them. Okay, so grant details. This grant, I'm going to just put all these here. So this grant is a $12,000 grant. Folks can request up to $12,000. The project period begins May 1st, 2025 and ends April 30th, 2026. Sorry, I will update this so that it says 2025 here when I send this out. This grant is open to any DC-based individual, community group, or nonprofit organization. And when we say community group, that could be an informal group of individuals that may not have formal 501c3 status. They are welcome to apply. They would just need to identify one individual to serve as the primary grantee and point of contact. Individuals may choose, or informal groups may choose to apply with a fiscal sponsor, but that's not required. Individuals can apply for this grant. We have approximately 5 awards available in 2025. Last year, we funded 45%, just under half of eligible Beyond the Archive applications. So that kind of gives you a sense of the grant and the scope. Once funded, grantees are required to submit 2 reports. They submit an interim report that will be due October 15th, 2025, and then a final report due May 30th, 2026, which is 30 days after the grant period ends. And the interim report is much shorter. It's really just a check-in that where you can give kind of the status of where you are, and we ask you to fill out a budget to actuals table, but we don't require any documentation at that stage. The final report does require more input. There's documentation of all grant expenditures, a final budget to actuals table, and then you have to answer some questions, just kind of describing how the project went and how you were able to use the funds. Grantees also attend a kickoff call for new awardees at the beginning of the grant period. It's usually a 20 to 30-minute call that goes over a lot of these grant requirements that we're talking about today. So some allowable and unallowable expenses. 100% of grant funds must be applied to direct program costs. So this grant cannot fund overhead or general operating expenses. All expenses must be related to this project. But that can include supplies and equipment. It can include rental of virtual or in-person spaces for public events. So if you were doing a virtual series, it could include the cost for Zoom subscription or renting a space, a public space where you wanted to host an event. It will fund honoraria, wages, and stipends. So that includes funds to pay yourself as well as any participants in the project. If you're including narrators whose oral histories are going to be used in the event or the project, you can pay them as well for their contributions, and really anybody else working directly on the project. It will include transportation, and it will include any kind of publicity, promotion, printed materials, things that will help get folks, increase the audience for your project. So on the other side, what this grant cannot fund is the recording of new oral history interviews. And I want to highlight that because This grant really is intended to spotlight existing oral histories that have already been recorded, that come from an archive. The goal of this funding is really to showcase existing oral histories that are archived, that may not have a public audience, and the goal is to really give these a public audience. It can't fund, as I said, indirect costs like rent or utilities or general office supplies. If you're hosting an event, this cannot fund food or refreshments or any kind of hospitality. It will not fund re-granting, funding to government agencies, or any costs related to fundraising. So let me pause and see if there are any questions. And I haven't been following the chat, so I know if there are any questions there.
No questions in the chat so far.
Okay. Any questions about eligibility or allowable expenses? Okay, I will continue. Wait, sounds okay. So components of a successful application. The main thing is that identification of an oral history archive that is accessible to you. So that could be Dig DC, that could be the archive that's held at the People's Archive through the public library, or it could be something your organization has captured, something that you've captured. Maybe you conducted oral histories of your family or elderly folks in your neighborhood, and that's sitting on a hard drive at home. That could be considered an archive. But basically, we want to see that you already know what oral histories you're going to be using, and that you have strong scholar or community expert involvement. So this is a piece of this application. We require that applicants identify some individual with significant knowledge or experience of the topic area that's explored by the archived interviews that you're using. So this scholar does not need to be a formal academic scholar. They don't need to be a professor or have academic formal training. They could have lived experience or be a culture bearer in the topic that you're focused on. But really the idea is that this person helps ground the project either in the discipline that you're focused on or in the community that you're focused on. Successful applications will include a very detailed project narrative with responses to the questions that clearly show how you're going to carry out this project. If you want to create a podcast that uses oral histories, how are you going to do that? You know, what phase will be kind of the planning and purchasing phase? And then what phase will be reaching those, selecting the interviews, selecting the archived recordings that you want to use? How will you be reaching out to the narrators or their families, things like that? And that's also a piece of the community collaboration. So if you are, if you're showcasing interviews of folks who are currently living, if possible, getting their input in the project planning, maybe getting their, maybe they participate in the planning or the actual project itself, but making sure that you have their buy-in or their family's buy-in. As well as, other community partners, other ways that you're involving your community to make the event more successful. And so on the flip side, some common issues that folks have with the Beyond the Archives application is that they've not identified existing oral histories or the narrators, or they're proposing to collect new oral histories. If that's the case, then they would be marked ineligible for this grant. So as we said, the intention is really to showcase existing oral histories. Other issues are that key personnel are not identified, including your humanities scholar. Ideally, you will have that humanities scholar already kind of engaged and working with you, and their name will be in the application, as well as any other team members or folks that you want to work with on your project. If you've not yet identified partners, maybe you're thinking about a place to host your event, but you haven't reached out, that's okay. But including that information in your application, being able to speak to your thoughts on that will help reviewers see that you've already given it some thought and that some of this work is already being done so that you can have a very successful application. The timeline misses key steps. So we'll go through the application, but the timeline should be very detailed. And reviewers often look to the timeline to see, have they thought through all of the steps that are necessary to take this project to fruition? So if they're planning an event, have they given themselves time to identify a space? Have they given themselves time to promote the event on multiple platforms? Have they given themselves time to evaluate the event once it's done? Things like that. The other thing is that the timeline could fall outside of the grant period, which is, again, May 1st of this year to April 30th, 2026. So project activities and spending needs to occur within that timeline. And then the last thing is that collaboration piece with the community lacks specifics. So again, as much as you can name organizations, partners that you're planning to work with or hope to work with, that is a really strong thing to include in your application. We know that these things change, even if you were to receive funding. If your partner, the partners that you've identified you're no longer able to work with, that's okay. But doing your best in your application to lay this out would be really good, and reviewers look for that. So I see a question here. Does applying or receiving this grant affect other grant opportunities? For example, the independent practitioner grant mentioned earlier. So yes, if you were to receive the independent practitioner fellowship, you would no longer be eligible for individual funding through our community grants. The Independent Practitioner Fellowship, as we said, the application's due January 20th, and we expect to inform folks about their whether they got the grant or not in mid-February. So will be around the same time as the application due date for the Beyond the Archives grant. So if it comes after and you've already submitted the Beyond the Archives grant and you find out you get the fellowship, then we would just not review your application for funding. But if you didn't get the Independent Practitioner Fellowship, then we would still be able to review your Beyond the Archives grant. Any other questions? I want to now move to the application and go through specifically. Okay, well, that's okay. I'm going to just go to the application here. There. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. So the application is online. I'm not going to show you how to create an account right now, but I will show you our website where you can find that information. So this is the Humanities DC website, humanitiesdc.org. When you come to the website, if you go up to Community Grants and then click on Grant Opportunities, that will take you to the page that has all of the information you need to know about our community grant offerings. And so here are all of the grant opportunities listed. The Community Culture and Heritage Grant Visions, the DC Oral History Collaborative grants are here, and that's where you'll find the RFP for the Beyond the Archives grant. And you can see here the information that it's due February 18th. Here is a recording of kind of a general information session that we hosted, as well as the advertisement for all of these workshops. This is the one that you're currently attending. But then here are our applicant resources. So here's the portal, the grant portal login for the application. And then here, the second thing is the grant portal instructions. So this is a detailed run through of how to create an account in Foundant, which is our grant management system, how to, set up your profile so that you can begin an application. If you have already submitted applications to Humanities DC in the past, please do not create a new account. You can sign into your existing account. And if you don't know your password or you forgot, you can just click the Forgot Your Password link and reset your password. Or you can reach out to us and we can help you reset your password. But so once you've done that, once you've created your account, this is what you will apply to. You will look at the application here. So the Beyond the Archives application has several parts. The first part here is just a description of the review process and the review criteria. So all Humanities DC applications are reviewed by a panel of external grant reviewers who are individual community members with humanities experience, perhaps experience with oral history in this grant, And we strongly encourage any of you who are interested to apply to be a grant reviewer. Grant reviewers review about 15 grant proposals over the course of 3 weeks. It tends to be about a 20-hour commitment. And at the end of it, reviewers receive a $250 honorarium. It is a really great way to understand the process of our grants, to understand what we're looking for when we choose funding, and also just meet other cool humanists and folks who are engaged in DC. We also host a fun open house in the summertime where we invite reviewers to meet with the grantees that they've chosen. We strongly recommend it. So again, if you're interested, you can find that information on our website up in community grants and become a grant reviewer. And that will give you all the details about becoming a reviewer. So then the second piece is the applicant information. So this is where you will define who you are as an applicant. Are you applying as an individual, or are you applying on behalf of a nonprofit organization? So if you choose individual, then you would indicate where you're located in DC, where your address is. Then you would indicate how you learned about this grant opportunity. This really just kind of gives us a sense of what's working as we recruit new grantees. And then here's a section where you can enter your previous grant experience. Note, this is not a requirement. You don't have to have any grant experience. And this question is not reviewed by grant reviewers. There's no scoring in this. This is really just to give us a sense of how are folks finding us? Are folks moving through our grant programs and applying for multiple grants? It's helpful for us to know so that we can understand who we're serving. If you choose organization, the questions will be very similar here, but different things will pop up. So organization applicant information down here, you will enter your annual budget. We don't have a requirement around annual budgets, but this again just helps us understand who we're serving. And then you would provide an organization profile. So your mission statement, a brief history of your founding, and how you think this project will support the mission's goals. We also ask that you enter the number of full-time employees. If you are completely volunteer run, or if you are a small organization, that's okay. Again, this is not scored, but applicants that have 15 or more full-time employees will be subject to the Americans with Disability Act compliance. And so a different section will pop up if you enter over 15. If not, no big deal. And then you would enter whether or not you are a fiscal sponsor. So if you decide to work with a fiscal sponsor as an individual or community group, the fiscal sponsor is the organization submitting the application. So if that's the case for this application, you click yes, and then you would enter the information about the sponsored entity. That would be you, the individual, or the informal group. But if you selected individual, then there would just be this individual applicant information. So here you would enter your individual statement of interest, what got you motivated to explore this project. Maybe you can talk about your experience with the archive that you're working with. And then we ask for proof of age and residency. Again, this is not seen by our grant reviewers, but this allows us to see that you are eligible, you're a DC resident, and that you're over 18. We accept driver's license, passport, utility bills, different things, but that's here. Okay, so this is the first scored section. This is the project description, feasibility, and timeline. And you can see this is 40% of the total score. This section has the highest weight of the application. So what reviewers are looking for here in this section is that the applicant has provided a clear and detailed description of the proposed project and its activities, including how the oral history recordings will be incorporated. Narrators and the archive are identified. And when we say narrators, we're talking about the individual that provided the oral history, the individual who was interviewed. They are called narrators. The timeline is within the grant period and seems feasible. The project has a thematic connection to Washington, D.C. and is accessible to the public, and that achievable goals or impacts are described, and that the applicant has a clear plan for assessing the project's success. So as you're filling out this application, you want to make sure that you're hitting all of these key points in order to score well. So here you enter the name of your project and the amount requested, which is up to $12,000. You may request less than $12,000 if you don't think you need that much, but we don't provide partial grants and we don't score applicants higher if they request less than $12,000. So you should certainly ask for what you need. Here you would enter the humanities discipline that you're focused on. If you're, exploring older oral histories that explore like a community or the history of a community, you would enter history, but you can look through these and kind of decide which one you think fits best. And then you would identify the project type. So this could be a conference that utilizes oral histories, documentary film, event, festival, etc. If you're not sure, or if you feel like none of these really fits, then you would select other and enter what you're thinking here. Here is a key section where you describe the oral history interviews on which your project will be based. So this is where you identify the archive, you talk about the narrators, this is where you're able to show these are the already recorded oral histories that we'll be focused on. You'll also give an approximate number of the number of narrators you'll be featuring. So again, narrators are the folks who were interviewed. You don't have to know exactly, but give an approximate number of the number of interviewed folks that you'll be featuring. And then here you would provide a detailed description of the project. So you've identified the oral histories, you've identified the number of folks you're featuring, and now here you're going to say, how are we using these oral histories? Are we weaving these into a presentation? Are we weaving them into a podcast, a documentary film? But this should be very detailed. We allow for 5,400 characters here, which is about 3 pages. You don't have to fill it out entirely, but give as much detail as possible. And in particular, focus on how will the oral histories be incorporated to the project. One of the number one things that folks have problems with in their applications is there's just not enough detail. And reviewers are reviewing the application and they just aren't sure what the individual's proposing or what the applicant is proposing. So as much detail as you can provide here. And same thing with the timeline. Hit key dates. You can go month by month, you can go quarter by quarter. But as that, you don't need to put a full paragraph here. You can do bullet points if that makes more sense. You may also upload a visual representation of your timeline if you have that already. But as detailed as possible, over-explain your process here. And then the last piece of this section is measuring success. How will you know that your project was successful? Describe what your goals are, what you hope the impact to be. Could be the number of attendees or the number of folks who access your digital website. It could just be sort of increasing awareness of a topic, but how do you know that? How will you know that your impact has been achieved? Maybe you are doing brief surveys of people who participate, but as much detail as you can provide here is helpful. Okay, so that is that section. So now we will look at capacity and personnel. That is the second scored section of the application. It's worth 25% of the total score. And reviewers will look at the following: that the project director, as demonstrated, is capable of managing this project to completion, that the humanities scholar or community expert has relevant qualifications for the proposed project, and their role is clearly defined and lends some legitimacy or intellectual authority, and that other team members and collaborators are clearly identified and explained as necessary. So here you would enter the project director. If you're applying as an individual, chances are that would be you, but not necessarily. This is the person who's kind of doing the nuts and bolts, making sure this project is carried out. You may have multiple people serving in this role as well, but we strongly encourage you to identify one person here, and then you can describe other folks in the team members section. You would answer all of these questions, including their address. Project directors do not need to be DC residents, but they should have some kind of connection to the project, which is then hopefully connected to DC. And then here you can describe past experience of the project director, and really anything that would be helpful to show the reviewers that this person is capable to take this project to completion. You could include links to past work. You can also upload past examples of work, but this is how you would answer this question. Team and collaborators. So these are folks who are helping you take your project to completion. It could be organizations that you're partnering with or other folks in your neighborhood who are helping you do this project. But describing them, naming them if possible, and in particular, describing what their role will be is really key. Here is the section on the community scholar or the humanities scholar or community expert. As we said, it's strongly encouraged that you name this person, that you already know who this person will be. And ideally, you've talked to this person and they know that they are the humanities scholar for your project, and they know that you're submitting this application and are ready to serve in this role should you be awarded funding. We ask that you provide their information and their mailing address. Again, they do not need to be DC residents. We very rarely reach out to humanities scholars, but we may reach out to them with your permission to share other opportunities or things that we have coming down the pipeline. You may upload a resume or a bio here of the community scholar, and then kind of a description of what it is that their role will be in the project and the experience that they have that makes them the right person to serve in this role. The project director could also be the humanities scholar, if that makes the most sense. They can, wear two hats and serve in two roles, but we would strongly encourage you to really identify the different roles that that person would be playing in those different spaces that they're occupying. The third section that will be scored is community collaboration and public engagement. This is worth 25% of the total score. And reviewers will be looking to see that the applicant demonstrates the project's significance to the DC community, that they've demonstrated how the project would be strengthened through collaboration and engagement with the public, that there's a clear and effective plan for reaching and engaging the project's target audience, and that the project will be inclusive, diverse, and equitable and accessible, defined broadly to include financial, geographic, demographic, cultural, and developmental accessibility. So here you would include your target demographic for the folks that you want to participate in your project. Maybe they're the audience members at your event. You could include general population if you want to just reach the general pop, but if you have specific age groups that you're trying to reach, specific race and ethnicity target audiences that you're trying to reach, you can indicate those here. Same thing with DC ward. So if you're trying to reach all wards, you can just select them all or primarily either one. Here's this question we haven't asked in the past, but we're asking it differently this year. What is the significance to the DC community? So this is where you can make your case for how this project is really significant and needed currently to be funded in order to, reach or reach a community or, have some particular impact that isn't being had currently. So you describe the reasons why this is necessary, and maybe this uncovers an untold story or reaches an underserved population or uncovers something unique and innovative. But this is where you can make your case here. Narrator engagement. So this is where you'll talk about how you're engaging with the folks whose interviews you're utilizing. If they're no longer living, maybe you're talking about how you're ensuring that their stories are being accurately represented. Obviously, using their voices and their recorded stories is a piece of that. So talking about how you're showcasing that, the care that's being taken. If you're able to find family members or other representatives of these narrators, then you can talk about that as well. And then lastly, the outreach strategy. How are you going to reach your target audience? How are you going to ensure that the public is going to experience this work? Including how this project will be accessible. So again, we define accessibility broadly. So, maybe you're saying here, well, we're hosting an event and it will be free. So that makes sure that it's accessible to anybody, no matter their financial background. Maybe you're ensuring that the event is held in a central place that's metro accessible. Things like that are kind of another way to think about accessibility. And then the final section that receives a score is the budget. This is worth 10% of your score. And this is where reviewers are going to be looking to see that you've accurately, clearly described how funds will be used and that all expenses are directly tied to the proposed project activities and that budget expenses are allowable. So again, thinking back to those two lists of allowable and unallowable expenses, making sure that all of your expenses are in that allowable column. So we have a budget table here that we've broken down. Honoraria is typically funding that's given to participants, maybe speakers, maybe the narrators or representatives of the narrators to ensure that they're participating. Things like, or your humanities scholar could receive an honoraria. Salary and wages, that is for perhaps your time or the time of others who are, helping to put on this project. Travel, supplies, any equipment or things that you'd be purchasing. If you're hosting an event, if you need to rent chairs, things like that would go under supplies. Publicity, promotion, and printing, that's related to if you're placing ads, social media ads, promoted posts, anything related to getting your project out there. Renting a facility, whether that's online or in person. Evaluation expenses, that could be a SurveyMonkey account to do a survey of your participants or something like that. And then anything that you feel doesn't really fit into these categories, you would put in other. And as you enter all of this information, it will automatically add up in the bottom here. And so you can enter up to $12,000 in this column. If you have additional funding for this project, you can enter that in the cost share column, but it's not a requirement. And then this budget narrative piece, this is where you will describe each of these expenses. So if you have $500 in honoraria, you would explain who's receiving that honoraria and how you arrived at that number. This can be a bulleted list or it could be multiple sentences. It's up to you. But as much detail as you can provide to show reviewers that, yeah, these expenses make sense. It's good that this person's paying themselves for this work because they're going to be putting in X number of hours, things like that.
And about the budget, Leia,
Yeah.
asked in the chat, would freelance creative work, such as video editing, be under honoraria or salary?
I think that would go under salary, personally, but it's really, as long as you're describing it in the budget narrative, it could fit under either. And something else that we note is that budgets are plans. They don't need to be set in stone. We know that budgets will change and that you're basically approximating expenses here and they may change. Maybe the space is given to you for free and then suddenly that frees up some money. So grantees always have opportunities to update their budgets, but do your best to provide as much as you can here what you think you'll be spending. The last piece is the appendix. This section is not scored, but it provides reviewers greater information if you wish to provide it about you or your project or any of the team members on your project. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you reshare your screen, please?
Oh, my bad. Yes, thank you. All right, thanks, Hillary. Can you all see my screen now? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, this is the appendix section. This is the final section of the application. No, it's the second to last section of the application. And so this is where you can provide supporting documentation. This could be links to videos. It could be letters of commitment from your narrators or from maybe someone at the archive that you're accessing. It could just be general letters of support from others that you've worked with. Contracts from vendors if you know that you're working with a particular vendor, any other planning documents or past work that you've done that you think would lend to this project proposal. We ask the reviewers only look at what's in the application. So if you want to include social media, you want your reviewers to look at your website, things like that, make sure that that's put somewhere in the application. You could put it here, or you could put it under the project director experience or under the description of activities, wherever you think it makes most sense. But make sure that you include it if you want reviewers to see it. So there's space to enter text here up to 10,000 characters, which is a lot of space, as well as 5 different places to upload things.
Leah, I still don't see your screen. Can you try again, please?
Okay. Can you see now?
Yes. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just show this again. This is the appendix section, supporting documentation and text, where you would enter anything to support your application. There's 5 upload sections here. And then the last piece is legal compliance. This is where you sign your application. So if you're applying as an organization, the authorized signature would be whoever is authorized at your organization to sign contracts, things like that. If you're an individual, you would just sign it yourself. If you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, the fiscal sponsor would need to sign here. And then you would submit. So that is the application. Are there any questions? Let me go back to the presentation here.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I am a little confused about the expert part. Since it feels like it leans towards like academia, but then you're like, or it could be a personal lived experience. So I just I don't know how you kind of judge or measure that. I don't know if you can expand on that more. I just am worried, like, how would that help or hurt my application?
So it definitely doesn't need to be an academic, a formal person, a person with formal training. So an example could be if you're exploring oral histories in GoGo, and you work with somebody who's a go-go musician who's been to a bunch of go-go's, who has like experience from way back. That could be your humanities scholar, your community expert who roots your project in that community. If you're doing something like focused on a particular neighborhood or block, maybe it's somebody who's lived there for a long time and can sort of be an advisor throughout the project, make sure that you're hitting on some key topics, or truly representing the community that you're hoping to represent. Does that help at all?
I think so. I guess it's I guess I'm like puzzled when writing the application, because it's like, well, I mean, what if I feel like I'm the expert? So I don't know if it's writing. I don't know if it again helps or hurts if I like continue to write my name in all these boxes that you have. So that's what is conflicting, or not quite, making me unsure about this application.
If you feel that you are the expert, then you should enter yourself as the community expert. As long as you're making that case, reviewers wouldn't remove points for that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, since it's dead silence, how often do people apply for the interview, the first part, before doing the beyond? If you know what I mean? Does that happen a lot? And is that considered normal? I don't know. Just Is it like guaranteed that you get the beyond once you get approved for the first one, the interviewing one?
Great question. So it's very frequent that folks will first apply to the oral history interviewing grant and then get a Beyond the Archives grant. I can't say that it's guaranteed, but I noted that the Beyond the Archives grant, we last year funded 45% of applicants. And if you've been through the oral history interviewing grant already, there's a very strong chance you know our process. You clearly have access to an archive. You have experience working with narrators. So that will lend all of these questions that we ask in this application. How will you know you're working with these narrators? How will you know you're representing them? Well, you'll be able to speak to that having gone through the oral history interviewing grant. So, definitely a great way to go about this. It's a good model. And it's very frequent and while not guaranteed, it's definitely, I think, a strong way to gather these oral histories and then take a project outside of the archive.
Okay. And from what I am comprehending or getting or understanding is the second part, you kind of have like more or less free range to do whatever you want with the content.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're, as long as you have permission and from the interviewers and that you are, or the narrators that, you can craft a project that really can look however you want it to look. As long as it's public facing, that's kind of the main thing.
Public facing mean open to the public.
Yeah, right. So if that's a book,
right.
That's a podcast, an event, yeah.
And how soon from one to the other can you apply? Is it usually the next year?
Yeah, if you complete the oral history interviewing grant in 1 year, you gather your 5+ interviews, then next year, absolutely, you could apply to the Beyond the Archives grant.
Okay, I guess that's it.
We haven't decided on the application deadlines for 2026 just yet. So the timing might be a little funky, but it is definitely not unusual for one grantee to receive oral history interviewing in year 1 and then directly in year 2. They turn around really quickly to do Beyond the Archives. But there can also be several years between the two as well. So if you wanted to take a year off or several years off and come back to the project later, that's totally okay as well.
I am sorry. I've been trying to attend all your webinars, but there was one I couldn't attend on Monday, the Community Culture and Heritage Grant. And I'm honestly like always feeling a little overwhelmed because it's like, I don't know, it feels like somewhat of a repetitiveness to it. So since like there's hardly any other questions, I was just wondering, like, is there any real distinct difference between this Community Culture Heritage Grant versus the oral history? Besides, I know it goes to the archives, which I like. So, is that really the distinct, and it has that little bit extra funds for translation. But like technically it feels like you could have like a similar project nonetheless. I don't know.
So the main difference is that the Community Culture and Heritage Grant does not focus solely on oral histories. You could do any kind of a project that doesn't use oral histories. You could do oral histories with the Community Culture and Heritage Grant, but then you wouldn't receive that training and it wouldn't go necessarily into the People's Archive. The Oral History Interviewing Grant is specifically just to collect oral histories. And the Beyond the Archives grant is specifically just to utilize oral histories.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I gotcha.
And in the chat, I'm going to link to our website because we have done, in addition to these grant-specific workshops, we've done information sessions that talks about all 6 opportunities and the differences between all of them. So that might be a good resource to look at as you're trying to figure out which grant to apply to. So I'll plop that in the chat.
Yes, I appreciate it. I really do like the idea of transcribing too as part of the oral history. So you're making sure other cultures and that easy accessibility in the archive. So that's very appealing. So great. I guess that's it. I won't want to hold up other people's questions if they do have any.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well,
How
if,
soon do you know? Sorry.
yeah,
How soon do you how long does it take to know that you've been accepted?
applications are due February 18th, and then the review process takes typically start to finish about 6 to 8 weeks. So we expect to let folks know in early to mid-April.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
And if you're chosen to be a grantee, then you would receive the funds approximately 2 weeks after that. Because we know that applicants are eager to get going, so we like to move through the process as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. If you do think of other questions, here is our contact information. We review this grants inbox frequently and respond every day to questions that come here. So please do reach out to us. We also offer office hours, which are 20 to 30-minute meetings with me or Hillary to talk specifically about your project, maybe questions you have about which grant to apply to, or questions about application questions. We also offer the opportunity to submit a draft application. If you fill out the application in the grant management system and save it as a draft, you can email us at grants@humanitiesdc.org at least 1 week before the deadline, and we can review it and provide feedback.
Oh, awesome. I like that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And as I said, this session was recorded. We are going to have all of these uploaded to YouTube and on our website, so you'll be able to review this. And the slide deck will be there as well, so you can review any of the information presented, especially when I wasn't sharing my screen and you may have missed some key things. So apologies for that. Well, I won't take any more of you all's time. Thank you so much for being here. And we hope that you will apply to the Beyond the Archives grant or another grant as you see fit. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for being here.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.